It's 6 p.m. It's our count time. The count is on, everyone. Today makes it 45 days since President Bola Tinubu became President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And we're following the developments in his first 100 days in office. It looks like he now has only 15 more days to make that ministerial list known to the National Assembly. Thanks for joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye, and coming up on the show today, we're talking about the federal government and its full subsidy palliative. I'll be joined by Boyega Isiaka, who's a federal lawmaker representing Egbado North and Imekwafon Federal Constituency at the House of Representatives. Also joining me is the social entrepreneur and public affairs analyst Chukwuma Okenwa, who is CEO Lead Network Africa. You can join the conversation right now on Twitter. Remember to use the hashtag #first100days, tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye. Let's begin from the National Assembly now, where the Senate has confirmed the appointment of service chiefs by President Bola Tinubu. The confirmation followed the screening by the Committee of the Whole, which was presided over by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio. The nominees were earlier subjected to the Chamber's protocol, where they were asked to introduce themselves, and then we understand there was a closed-door meeting where questions were asked, and they were later confirmed by voice note by the Senate. You know who the service chiefs were. Now they have been confirmed.
Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Major General C.J. Musa as Chief of Defense Staff? Those in favor of the confirmation say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. C.J. Musa, Major General, is hereby confirmed as Chief of Defense Staff. Distinguished colleagues, will the Senate confirm the nomination of Major General T.A. Lakwaja as Chief of Army Staff? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Major General T.A. Lakwaja is hereby confirmed as the Chief of Army Staff.
After the break, we'll turn our attention to government's intervention to cushion the effect of full subsidy removal. We now know that includes a 500 billion naira extract from the 2022 Appropriation Act and a new request to borrow $800 million from the World Bank. Stay with us.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu, do solemnly swear
So is respite coming to Nigerians after the removal of full subsidy? Guess we'll find out in the coming days. But here's what we know. The Senate today passed the amendment bill to authorize the issuance of 819.5 billion naira from the 2022 Appropriation Act to provide palliatives to, cushion the effect of full subsidy removal. The Senate also approved additional financing of $800 million to be sourced from the World Bank for the National Social Safety Net program of the federal government. President Tinubu earlier today sought the approval of the Senate for an additional $800 million loan facility for the federal government's National Social Safety Net program, which was earlier approved by the Federal Executive Council under President Muhammadu Buhari administration. The request was communicated to the Senate through a letter addressed to the Senate and was read by the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, at plenary. According to the letter, the purpose of the loan facility is to expand coverage of shock-responsive safety net support for poor and vulnerable Nigerians to help them cope with the cost of meeting basic needs, and it's to be financed by the World Bank. The letter also gave some more details about how this money is to be dispersed. And this is interesting. Under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, the federal government will now transfer 8,000 naira per month via digital transfer to 12 million poor and low-income households for a period of 6 months, with what government calls a multiplier effect on about 60 million individuals. President Tinubu also earlier wrote to the Senate to seek its approval for the amendment of the 819 billion naira 2022 Appropriation Act, which has now been approved. The purpose for this amendment is to extract 500 billion naira from the supplementary budget to provide palliatives. And we have the breakdown now, but we'll share it with you later on the show. I'm joined now live from our Abuja studio by Boyega Isiaka, who's federal lawmaker representing Egbado North and Imekwafon Federal Constituency at the House of Representatives. Also joining me is Chukwuma Okenwa, CEO, Lead Network Africa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Let me begin with the Honorable. What do you make of how long it's taken the federal government to implement its intervention 45 days after the big announcement of removing fuel subsidy?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, to me, that is not so long a time. All of this requires a lot of thinking, and we need to ensure that exactly what we want to get for these things to be done are done. And 45 days is not such a long time to get this approval, knowing fully well that this is 45 days from commencement of an administration. It's not as if there had been some planning on this particular item before. So for me, I think it is still within a tolerable limit for this approval to come. I think what is important now is for government to get into action so that people will begin to feel the effect of this approval, from both chambers of the National Assembly. So for me, I think it's in order in terms of the timing.
Mr. Okenwa, the Honorable says that 45 days a tolerable limit for government intervention. But has there been an adequate response from state governments as well, who by now we expect should have experienced the boost in the federal allocation occasioned by full subsidy removal?
Okay, well, I think when we look at some state governments, we began to see like some adjustments, starting from the issue of adjusting the number of working days. But beyond that, what of course we expect the state government to do that should be foremost on its intervention would be to raise the bar in terms of generating in terms of internally generated revenues, because just depending on the federal allocation at the moment, it's no longer sustainable with the current realities.
Bother you, Mr. Okenwa, that the impact of this increased revenue, does it bother you that the state governments, really have the capacity to make people feel it in the short term?
Yeah, it's really a concern because, of course,
We'll probably get back to Mr. Okenwa while he fixes network. Honorable, I'm sure you can hear me. Your colleagues at the Senate have now approved the two requests from Mr. President. The first is the extract of 500 billion from the 2022 Appropriation Act and borrowing $800 million for government social safety net program. What do you make of this move from the executive at this time?
Well, the important thing, in my view, is for us to know that subsidy or subsidy removal is not an end in itself. It's just a means to an end. An end for us in this country, in my view, includes a double-digit growth, includes, a foreign exchange rate along its fundamental path, include an inflation rate that is single digit, and include, output and productivity that takes care of, unemployment. We have a government that is bold, that is courageous, that is taking measured risk in the last 45 days. And therefore, I do not have the details of this, additional one that you mentioned. At least it's not been disclosed to us on the floor by the leadership, even if it has come to the leadership of the House at all. Maybe when we get the details, I can comment more on it. But I think the important thing for us to know is that subsidy is not the whole thing that we are looking at. And the palliative, because of course, we know that subsidy, just like any major economic initiative, we have short-term pains, but with a lot of long-term gains. So in all of this, I don't want us to begin to look at this in bits and pieces. The important thing for me is that how do we ensure that some 6 months, 1 year down the line, a 23-24% inflation rate begin to come down? How do we ensure that the production, the GDP growth at a very good rate? I think those are the things. And I like to believe that this government that we have in place now is taking very bold moves towards that. Like I said, I don't want to pick the issue of the additional fund because I don't have the details of it. I just saw it being scrolled on your screen as I was coming in. I know that as I was leaving the chamber, the House of Reps chamber, the Senate was still in plenary. So maybe that's where all this came up. I don't have those details, but for me, anything and everything that we need to do for us to reach the end is what I think we should do. Like I said, it is not about we taking this or taking that. The important thing is that in all this gamut of measures and all this gamut of approaches, how do we, are we moving towards a double-digit growth in our? Right now, we are doing about 3%. We have the capacity of doing 10, 12%. And I think the president that we have now and the executive that we have now, is taking some major steps towards that. How do we ensure that, our foreign exchange rate are being determined by the fundamentals, or even if there are some interventions, everything still work towards that? How do we ensure that the inflation rate comes down? Those to me are the main, parameters. And I would like for us to look at that. Oh, of course, along the line of that, there will be some discomfort. There will be some pains. And I think that is what all these palliatives are meant to achieve. So that, at the end of the day, we can have a bigger country, a better country, a more buoyant country, which we actually have the potentials to do.
I understand your comprehensive approach, Honorable, but you will also appreciate the immediate need of Nigerians who now have to pay more for commodities at the market, and the sharp increase in price of goods and services aftermath that big announcement on Inauguration Day. It's why Nigerians are concerned about how much money is being earmarked to intervention and what exactly would the money be used for. We now have the breakdown of the 819.5 billion naira, and we'll share with you shortly. But let me bring in Mr. Okewa into this conversation. You were talking about governors focusing on internally generated revenue, but the removal of fuel subsidy also means more money for them from the federal government allocation. How should this money be spent in the short term for Nigerians who now feel the heat of increment in price of goods and services?
The economy of Nigeria is largely informal. And by that, what we want to see is we want to see more investment from the state governors into the SME centers so that businesses, small businesses, small and medium enterprises can have access to funds. And with that, they will be able to survive the current economic challenges that is occasioned by the virtue of the removal of the subsidy. So I expect the state governors, yes, we've seen some governors, like I probably may not want to be specific, but in the state where I currently speak from, the state government has come up with a robust plan to invest in, about 100 billion in the next coming months in terms of young enterprises being able to access funds, for businesses, including existing businesses and those with business idea. And I think if this could also be replicated all across the country, where businesses could be incentivized to survive in a time like this, I think it's really going to go a very long way.
Honorable Isiaka, you know, you attempted to be governor yourself about 3 times. So if you don't mind, if I can call you GNI, I'm just wondering what your contribution is as to expectations from governors in this regard. Because Nigerians that are watching you are concerned about, you know, what will happen in the short term. I understand your comprehensive approach, but what should governors be doing now if they now receive more money as federal allocation?
Well, definitely palliatives are necessary because the pains are there. I mean, we can't run away from it. So palliatives, you know, as demanded by the circumstances of every state, is very important, you know, to be looked at, either by way of salary increase. We've heard of some people that were, you know, reducing the number of days they come into work, or by way of, you know, cash out to families, or by way of empowerment, or by way of SME funding, like the other, you know, participants, you know, mentioned. You know, that is definitely very important, and increased revenue means that will be so much for us to do that. You know, so that is important. But at the end of the day, in addition to that, rather, it's also the fact that we should see we are all working towards the same economy, and the 36 state governments that we have to work in collaboration with the, you know, with federal government, so that we all can move towards the same long-term objective. So as we are looking at all of those, we're also looking at how do we, you know, utilize these possibilities and the opportunities that we have in each and every state that we have, so that even some of this revenue can also go towards that, so that we can have a buoyant economy at the end of the day. Now maybe in another 3 years or so down the line. So to answer your question straight, I would say that there will have to be some short-term, you know, measures, which is in terms of, you know, palliatives at the state level, and even possibly at the local government level, you know, because that is the one that can reach the average man or woman in the household, in the villages more. So there will definitely be that. What form should it take? How is it going to be done? Will have to be determined by the circumstances of every state. But I just add again that as we are doing that too, we must also continue to look at the bigger picture, because at the end of the day, we believe that we can still do a lot better than we are doing now as a country. Like I said, all of these palliatives, subsidies and all of that is just a means to the end for us.
Talking about doing better, Mr. Okenwa, Nigerians become very apprehensive when they hear that government is borrowing money. And now we're borrowing $800 million for social safety net program. I understand the expectation of government to reach out to the poor, but should we be borrowing money for this?
In all honesty, borrowing money to like a kind of make interventions for the poor in quote, it's not economically viable for Nigeria at this point. Being a developing economy, we can use the same templates that we see in developed nations. And the question actually we should be able to ask ourselves is, how intervening are actually the proposed interventions? 8,000 naira only to household. If we divide that with 30, 8,000 divided by 30 is about 267 naira. You and I know that in today's Nigeria, 267 naira cannot help even the poorest of households to get anything. I'm just wondering what 267 naira can do for them. So yes, Mr. President has actually started on a good note, coming up with like robust economic policies to transform the economy. But of course, not matching that with some of the things we need now, which is getting the money together to be able to make like some serious interventions, maybe in our refineries, right? Getting it efficient to producing maximally, and some other like fixing infrastructure, the power, and all these things that we even ensure that the ripple effect is going to get to all Nigerians, and not just a situation where it's going to be like the few 12 million. So, and one thing that happens in economics is that one thing that the places where you invest is also going to determine where you are going to have like what is going to drive your economy as a nation.
So, Honorable, we had this conditional cash transfer under the previous government of Muhammadu Buhari. Now we're proposing 8,000 naira to 12 million poor individuals. Do you think it worked in the past 8 years?
Well, for this government, I mean, to start with, all of these I'm also getting to know in the last 2-3 hours. So you permit me that I only want to delve so much into what I don't have the details of. But I think the important thing is that, I also want to believe that, the government will have known what are the shortcomings of the previous attempt before they get into it. I think the important thing is that we just have to start somewhere. There's hardly any options that you want to look at that doesn't have shortcomings. And I understand. I hear the questions on the issue of borrowing for this purpose. I think it's also important for us to know that all of this has cost and benefit. The issue here is that the cost of subsidy to us as a nation in the last so many years compared to the cost of borrowing, so that we can stop it, so that we can cushion the effect of the subsidy, and then we can move on from there as a country. I think that really is the thing. If you ask me, anything and everything that we need to do in order for us to stop subsidy, so that we can at least have a better and a final fiscal regime is what is important. In terms of whether it works or it does not work, like I said, the details of how government wants to do it, I do not have it. But I also read somewhere on my way here that I say 1,000 naira cash transfer. Since I don't have the details, I only want to delve into whether that is exactly what they want to do or not.
Okay.
Except to just say that.
Allow me to bottle in very quickly, Honorable. Let me just share with you. We're wrapping up now. I'm just have your reaction to these details that is just coming in. We now have the breakdown of the 819.5 billion naira 2022 Appropriation Act that has just been approved by the Senate. 500 billion naira is for palliatives and other capital expenditure to cushion the effect of recent subsidy removal. 185 billion naira will go to the Ministry of Works and Housing to alleviate the impact of the severe flooding experienced in the country last year. And then there's another 19.2 billion naira which will go to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to ameliorate the massive destruction of farmlands across the country during the severe flooding experienced last year. 35 billion naira is going to the National Judicial Council, 10 billion naira to the Federal Capital Territory Administration for critical projects. Honorable should be excited about this. We understand that 70 billion naira is going to the National Assembly to support the working conditions of new members. We don't have the details of what that should do, but perhaps you can enlighten us. But let me have your reaction very quickly, Mr. Okenwa, to how this fund is expected to be disbursed and how effective, what's the economic implication of this disbursement?
Kali, from what we read out, 500 billion naira is for palliatives out of the 800 something. That on its own. And then Ministry of Works and then Judiciary. I think between those, almost 70-80% of the amount, is already going into that. Between the palliatives and the Ministry of Works. Ministry of Works, of course, will be to improve our infrastructure. We also need a good infrastructure in order for us to work well. So maybe the remaining amount is just for overhead. So definitely, from what we have there, the numbers it's almost 600 plus going into between palliative and capital expenditure, and then the remaining, for overhead. I think that is not a bad one, in my opinion. That is relying on the numbers that you have given, because like I said, I'm just hearing that from the details from you.
You skipped the 70 billion naira to the National Assembly to support the working conditions of new members. Perhaps you are new, you don't have the details of how that works.
No, well, it cannot be for new members. It can only be for the National Assembly. I mean, the National Assembly is part of government. You just mentioned judiciary. The National Assembly is another arm of government. So there must be a reason for it. There must be a need for it. But before they put it there, but I'm sure the details will be with the leadership and structures
Indeed.
of the National Assembly.
Well, I must say a big thank you to Chukwuma Okenwa, who is social entrepreneur and public affairs analyst, federal lawmaker representing Egbado North and Imekwa Federal Constituency at the House of Representatives. Honorable Isiaka, thank you so much for talking to us on the program this evening.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's our program. I'm Nifemi Yokuntoye. Bye for now.